COVID-19, why you do this to me? I really don't like being stuck in quarantine. I have no toilet paper, I don't even have a snack. Hey, coronavirus, I want my life back.
Sorry we're late, folks. It's Parker's fault. No, it's not Parker's fault. It's the company or whoever the company is that is responsible for our streaming. They're down. We didn't know they were down, so we just sort of went through a back door, and now we're just broadcasting on Facebook. But better late than never, I hope. How's everybody doing this evening? You've had an extra 20 minutes to decide how you're doing this evening. Let's see, has anybody noticed yet, Parker? I'm waiting. Anybody at all? I'm waiting. I'm looking at your comments. And nobody has noticed. Nobody has said anything. Who's going to be the first? Diana. There we go. Pam. Kevin, you shaved. It looks good. Yes. Look. What's that? How's everybody? I already asked that. Yeah, see, I'm all discombobulated right now. Let's get right to what we're grateful for. I gotta let this fall off my back, and let's just find out what you are grateful for today. Okay, this is going to be an interesting show, isn't it, folks? This is going to be an interesting show. But this is what happens when you have adversity hit you. You just rise above it as best you can. You smile, you brush yourself off, and you keep going. So today, definitely grateful for getting us on the air, and I'm grateful for Parker doing that. He was running around like crazy doing that, so I'm grateful for that. Grateful for your clip show. Oh, yes, the clip show last night. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Grateful that I finished writing my report cards. 'Tis the time of year. My thoughts go out to all of the teachers out there at this time of year, especially. Grateful I was able to type out 17 recipes. Grateful finally we were able to get on live. Yes, Rick, most definitely. For a while there, it was sort of touch and go. Okay, I'm gonna close off the gratefuls a little early because my guest has been waiting so patiently, and this man is incredible. He is the foremost expert on alternative medicine in Canada. And today we're going to talk not about lifespan. We're going to talk about something different. All these things factor into your lifespan, right? Exercise, vitamins, etc. But what about your brain span? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Bryce Wylde joins me right now. Good morning, Bryce. Or good evening. Good afternoon. Good evening, Bryce. Oh, and here we go.
Ben, good night.
Oh.
I'm grateful to be here.
I'm grateful you are too, but now it's your Skype that we're having difficulties with. I don't know. The digital gods are conspiring against us right now. No, I think you're coming back.
I hope so. And I'll tell you where your beard shavings went.
Yeah,
I picked them up and I glued them to my face. That's what I did.
It looks better on you. That's why I got rid of mine.
I dabble.
Yeah, so I mean, this was a shaky start to the show, folks, but this is going to be an interesting show. We're going to be talking about brain span. It's one thing to be able to say keep your body in shape and yourself in shape so that you can enjoy your senior years, but we want to talk about making sure your brain is kept in shape, and that is something that is coming up. But first and foremost, I want to wish Bryce a happy anniversary.
It is 20 years. 20 years long. Actually, I've been married for longer than that, but 20 years, Kev, and happy anniversary to you, too.
That's right. It was 20 years ago this year that Bryce and I first met and first worked together, and I think we've had a pretty decent friendship since then, Bryce.
You've had a great one. It's, and you are, seriously my mentor as it relates to on-air. What I've learned from you over the years is bar none, probably the most impressive. So, and I'll tell you, I'll remind you, when I had my own show on the air, back a few years, ran a good stint for about 7 or 8 years on CB24. I asked you in early days, I was real nervous to go on the air live, not as a guest. Of course, I'd already mastered the art of guesting, I suppose, starting with you back in 2000, April on BT. But I asked you, I said, how do you host a show? And you said, here's the most important thing. If you remember one thing only, as you're there, deer in the headlights, first time on camera, you remember one thing only, put yourself in the living room of the viewer and ask yourself in that moment, what is the viewer asking? What do they want to know more about right then and there? And that worked. That really worked well. And I appreciate that.
And I don't think this is something anybody would be asking what we're talking about today, but it's definitely going to be something that they're interested in, because honestly, I had never really thought much about it or even heard the term brain span, but you're actually writing a book about it, which is coming out in a couple of months.
I am. And you know what I'm going to do right out of the gate is I'm going to flip this to you as if you were temporarily the guest here. I'm going to ask you probably the most poignant question that I've asked myself and my patients for some time now. Kevin, this is for you.
Okay.
What have you done for your brain today?
What have I done for my brain today? You know what? Nothing. I have not given it any thought, no pun intended.
And frankly, I love it. Frankly, that is exactly why we're talking about this. So you probably know your weight to stand on the scale. I bet you know your cholesterol levels. I bet that you probably even know your vitamin D levels because you're a buddy of mine. But you probably don't know your hippocampal volume. You probably don't know what your prefrontal cortex, load is. You probably have never thought for a second about the most important thing in your body, ultimately your brain. And then we're talking more about this later on the show, the hippocampus, that's the memory center. When I say memory, when I say focus, I say attention, alertness, concentration, better sleep. Heck, we all want more of that, for sure. But we don't often think it's actually the brain that controls that and everything else about us. So brain health, first and foremost, is front of mind. In fact, here's the sad but true impetus of me getting into brain health and my practice taking a hard right turn and taking a special interest in brain health over the last 2 years. My own mother was diagnosed a couple of years ago with Alzheimer's disease. And so I took it upon myself to learn a lot more. Just out was the work of Dr. Dale Bredesen at UCLA. He wrote the book, The End of Alzheimer's. I read it cover to cover and a lot of his other work. And I'll tell you something, it changed the way I looked at Alzheimer's and all kinds of other cognitive decline and brain diseases. And my mom's doing well, thank God. She's very happy. She has some great care. This PhD turned Alzheimer's researcher, Dr. Bredesen, has reversed over 400 cases of reversed over 400 cases of Alzheimer's and or deadlocked them. So brought them back from stage 5, 6, and in some cases 7, into a stage 1 or 2. Now you can't cure it; it's incurable, but you can put it into remission. Just like something like cancer. So brain spanners, back full circle to the whole idea. I mean, you've heard of lifespan. That's how many years you'll clock on the planet. You've heard of perhaps health span. How many years you live on this planet well, or perhaps.
Oh, hold on, Bryce. We're going to let your Skype.
Hold on. Years you live well.
Hold on. We're just going to let your Skype catch up with you. It's, again, going in and out. Okay, continue.
Yeah, I apologize about the connection. I show 5 bars. So let me know if I need to stop again. But so lifespan is the amount of time you'll spend here on planet Earth. Health span is how long you'll be here in good health, perhaps even optimal health. But brain span, that's the amount of time you'll spend on this planet living in good health, but with full mental faculty to the day you die. And gerontologists, they call this squaring the curve. So ultimately, what you come into this world, relatively good health, and unfortunately, some people suffer some congenital issues. But if you're into this world at young age and good health, you want to stay there as long as possible before one day in later age, older age, you drop off, God willing, in your sleep from a heart attack. That's the ideal scenario. So it's what is in that space between that squared curve and what most of us in North America do, which is enter into some decline, in our late 30s and 40s, and then eventually, real sedentariness, poor diet, lifestyle, you threw it all up in the front. All of these things catch up to us, and then, we become relatively poor health later on in life. So what is all that stuff? What's all that noise between the squared curve and that slow, steady decline? This is what we're talking about as it relates to brain spanning. It's improving your diet, it's lowering inflammation, it's improving your lifestyle, it's getting more active, looking into potentially genes and DNA. And here's the great news, by the way, as it relates to DNA, genetics. You can't change your DNA. It's hardwired, right? It's the cards that mom and dad have dealt you. But the most incredible thing is that you can alter or manage your genetics. You can manage the genetic expression of the DNA that you've been dealt. And that's what I'd love to share with your viewers today.
Okay. Bryce, are you able to go hardwired with your connection, do you think?
I can if you give me a second.
You know
sure.
what? Okay, I'm going to hang up. I'm going to call you back because there's so much important that you want to say, but we're really having difficulty and your audio is off with your video a lot. So let me call you back. So let's let you off the line, and you go ahead and hang up, and we'll get back, and I will sit here and talk with everybody and keep them entertained until we get back. So you call me.
Okay.
And when you're ready. All right?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Apologize for that. You know, this is tough. Usually we have technicians and engineers that work on it, but it's just me and Parker. So we're at the the beck and call of our friends, the digital gods. So we'll wait for that to come up. Let's do a few more. What I'm grateful for as well. Because we need to fill the time, but also we had to cut it short a little bit different. And again, I apologize for stopping in the middle. It's just that his audio was right off. He kept freezing, and it was taking away from the very important information he has, which is interesting because we always think, right? We always think about planning for retirement. We want to exercise and work out, not just to look good now, but so that we're still able to move when we get older. We're trying to eat better. We're financially planning. A lot of people who are able to, so that we can live more comfortably. So the fact that he's talking about something that is everything to us that we've really paid not much attention to is really, really important. Here we go. Here's Bryce. You just answered. Okay, let's see if we've got you here, Bryce. Oh, not at all. No, it's not your fault. Hold on. There we go. I think that might be a little bit better. Let's bring you up and see. There we go.
My apologies.
Much better. Oh my gosh. Okay. Much better.
Hardwired.
Okay. So I was just talking with the audience about how we have planned to exercise so we can still move when we get older. For those of us who are able to try and plan financially, we plan our diet. But everything revolves around this, and we're not doing much to it other than downloading games on my phone that say this will be good for my brain if I download and play this game. That's it.
Listen, brain games don't hurt, nor does learning a language. Here's a fact: even if you learn a language and you put some serious hours into it, and we all have a little more time on our hands, the art of learning is more important than ever retaining any of the words that you might have learned in that language. That will grow the hippocampus, that part of the brain that's responsible for memory that you allowed everyone to see a 3D model of. But you're right. It's a lot more than memory games. It's a lot more than playing brain teasers and brain games. What we're trying to, I'm trying to get the message out there, and what we're talking about tonight is everything and all of those things that you can do to optimize brain health, because it's really brain down. When you think of what the best food to eat is that's healthy for the brain, you're going to benefit the heart, the digestive system, the lungs, and every other tissue in your body.
Well, let's start there. What is a healthy food for my brain? Is it poutine?
Right. So no. Obviously, there are good fats and bad fats, or oxidized fats, or fats that have otherwise putrefied that are very unhealthy for your brain. There's good fats, and we've heard about them. You and I have talked about, mentioning at the top, we've been on camera together so many times since 2000, for 20 years. I bet you if I asked you the question, what is the healthiest thing you could take for your brain in terms of, in your diet or supplementing, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I bet you could answer that question.
Oh, yeah, I mean, with the good fats. So you're talking about avocados, fish, stuff like that.
We're fatheads. We are fatheads.
Well, interesting, because in researching for today, one of the pieces of trivia that I found about our brain, it is the fattest organ in our body, 63% fat.
That's exactly what it is. And primarily a very special type of omega-3 called DHA. So DHA is what configures the cell membrane. It allows the neurons to fire and wire together. So this is otherwise known as neuroplasticity. So for so long, we actually thought that as of school age, that's it. Our brains dissolved, and or every day we're losing more and more neurons until the day we die. Not true. With the right amount of DHA in your diet, you're serving those neurons that we're looking at there, and their ability to fire together and wire together, and wiring together is ultimately learning. By the way, pruning back, something else we've learned, the ability to uncouple and unlearn. Okay, bad habits, for example, is also really important. I'll tell you who we can learn from. There's rich, vast amounts of information out there that have been compiled over the last 20 or 30 years from the centenarians. So these are people that live in Loma Linda, California, Seventh-day Adventists, so they are vegetarian. Then you've got people in Nicoya, that's Costa Rica. They are very, very heavy into fruits and vegetables, very highly antioxidant, berries and nuts and grains. Sardinia, Italy. You know what that diet is like, and that's been thrown around for so long. Very high in fish, as you mentioned. Icaria, Greece, another very high fish consuming population, and Okinawa in Japan. A lot of fish there as well. The one interesting thing about all of these places is they're near water. And being near water, they have a lot of access to fresh fish. And of course, fish are very high in that omega-3 DHA, which I affectionately refer to as brain juice.
So Brenda has a question on the screen. I only interrupt because she had just asked that. How much DHA should we take? How often, et cetera?
Right. So, first of all, full disclosure, I work for a company called Brain Armor, and everything that we do, and I'm a chief innovations officer there. Everything we do is about brain. We're the Healthy Brain Company. And so there's a product that you can purchase called Brain Armor, which is all about brain health. And it's 2 teaspoons a day, 1,500 to 3,000 milligrams of DHA. It's an upper level recommendation. I recommend all my patients. That is probably the number one most important nutritional, supplemental thing that we can do for our brain, bar none.
Okay, so food and the supplement. Is it too late for me in my 50s? Is it?
No, it's not too late for anybody. And that's another part of this excellent message is that you get into brain health and everything that you can do for your brain now. Neuroplasticity. This is the name of the game. Our brains are plastic. That means they're malleable. That means they could be traumatized and they can grow around the trauma. There could be a stroke, and it could be these nerves that ultimately learn how to regrow and grow around stroke material. Now, do I mean ever getting back to 100% optimal? That depends on the instance. Everyone's individual. The circumstances are individual. But what we're looking at now, this new day and age around brain health sciences is recovering in full from things like cognitive traumatic encephalopathy. This is very prevalent in the NFL. This is from constant head banging and bashing of head-to-head football. And then we've got things like MTBIs, or traumatic brain injuries. Those are very, very popular in things like soccer, heading the soccer ball. We have cognitive decline, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, stroke, post-stroke recovery. All these, this is an area that's burgeoning, but what we're saying is with the right care, you can actually reverse significant amounts of brain trauma. So never too late to start, an optimal routine. And once again, learning from this. Here's what we've learned.
If I could, just before we learn from the centenarians, because I want to take these questions as they come. Sure. So Marie has a question here: is there a DHA vitamin?
Yeah, so I was mentioning, so I'll put it up on camera here. So this is the one I highly recommend. So Brain Armor. This is the product. It's a vegan, by the way, very pure, very sustainable. So we no longer need to use fish, and it's a very high DHA omega-3 supplement. That
and Bryce was honorable enough to mention that he does work for this company, so it's just important to divulge that. So. That's
absolutely. I've got all kinds of other supplements to share with you guys tonight. I'd love to take supplement questions. That's my area of expertise. That's the only company I work with and for. It's the first and only company I've ever worked with. And you know me, Kevin, over the years, I've shared how many hundreds of different companies, none of which I've ever worked for. The reason I took this course, if you don't mind embellishing me for a moment, is because of my mother. I mean, I shifted. I went out and I solicited them. I wanted a job with a company that I could extend a product line. It's exactly what I'm doing right now, by the way, extending a product line that has everything to do with the brain. So I formulated a brain gut product, because that connection, we should talk a bit about that, maybe the connection between brain and gut. When this is upset, this is upset. And when, of course, your stomach, your gut's upset, your brain's upset. I've also created a heart-brain synergy product. And I'm working on a whole bunch of other things, everything to do with brain and brain health.
Paula, just very quickly as a question, can a transplant patient take it? I believe she's talking about the DHA.
Yeah, so check with your doctor or pharmacist before starting any new drug or supplement. But absolutely, if you're not taking things like Coumadin or warfarin or blood thinners, and your doctor approves you to take a high-dose DHA formula, not only is it okay, it'll actually improve the situation.
Quite a few people asking where they can get these products.
Yeah, so right now I'd highly recommend that they go to the online portals. They're available in some health food stores. Whole Foods is a great outlet. I love Whole Foods. But as we're continuing to stay at home and sort of minimize our exposure in these environments, online, brainarmor.com is a great portal, and brainspanners.com. Please check that website out. That's where I'm, populating all kinds of stuff around the book. You can get your brain health tested very shortly. That'll be live in late June, as it relates to where we've affiliated with Cambridge Brain Sciences, and we're doing a lot of brain health online assessments, so simple online tests you can take for yourself. And we're answering questions.
What kind of question, or how would that work?
So kind of similar to what you alluded to earlier insofar as brain game. So it's a slightly gamified test looking at verbal recall and looking at eye movements, looking at visual acuity as well as reflex, all kinds of little things that we can tell a lot about how well your brain is functioning.
Long-term use of cannabis on memory is a question Bryce is asking, and a lot of people are asking that these days.
Yeah, it's very true. You have CBD, cannabidiol, is in almost everything. I wouldn't believe look, there's a lot of good to say about CBD. You have to make sure it's the appropriate source. It's got to be a very isolated form of CBD, and it's got to be standardized. It's got to be clean. So there's a lot. Buyer beware, bottom line. But there are some virtues, and THC less so. So CBD cannabidiol, I think it's been overly touted, but there seemingly are some virtues, especially as it relates to most of the research is really around sleep, anxiety, and mental health. That's really a lot of the research. And of course, when that's not stable, you're not sleeping well, you're always anxious, you're depressed, you're stressed, your brain's not firing effectively. And ultimately, that's going to cause a lot of problems down the road.
So I have depression. In fact, you were one of the first people I ever turned to. I don't know if you remember that day that I had my first panic attack, and I didn't know what the hell it was, but you were one of the first people I turned to. So with my depression and anxiety, is it doing more damage to my brain if not taken care of properly, vice versa?
Well, so first of all, I do remember that. I do remember that, and this might be interesting to some of your viewers, because fast forward 10 years later, with you in studio, I had my first panic attack, and I shared that with you. It was a very strange experience as well. You might remember that as well. So panic can affect us, and anxiety can affect anybody. Whether it remains chronic is often worthy of doing a deeper dive into the underlying mechanisms, and of course those that would afflict the brain. You can't have anxiety, panic, depression, or problems with sleep unless your brain is malfunctioning. And of course, it's connected to every other organ in the body. So what we're talking about here is possibly underlying issues around the adrenal glands. Now, my personal experience, I later found out, I think, what my underlying issue was for that panic attack. I was taking a natural, mind you, remedy to support adrenals, because I was go at that time, probably less sleep than I should have, maybe not as optimal exercise routine, and I was kind of burning the candles at both ends. I was taking, go figure, me of all people, a supplement that I hadn't read the fine print around. In it, it happened to be that there was a glandular, which is actually pork rind, or from a pig source, and an organic, mind you, clean pig source, of an adrenal complex. I'd never taken that before. So what I was actually doing was taking something that was pushing my adrenal glands, these little organs that sit on top of your kidneys. They're responsible for fight or flight. So I was taking that, and unbeknownst to me, with a little bit too much coffee that day on air, I had my panic attack. But when it's chronic, and this is what I was alluding to, we're talking about, sleep has to be optimal, exercise has to burn off certainly that first morning cortisol, so you got to get your weight-bearing activity in there. Your diet has to be clean, your weight has to be good. And by the way, the most important thing you can do for your health of your brain is to keep a flat stomach. Brain and belly go hand in hand. And we can get into that. There's so many reasons there as it relates to inflammation, as it relates to immune function. But the larger the circumference, the girth of your belly, the more problematic, your brain or issues with your brain become. And we've learned that from the centenarians as well.
I want to get to something you were speaking about earlier, and it deals directly with that. You were saying when your stomach is upset, your brain's upset, and vice versa. So for people who have chronic problems, gastrointestinal, whatever they happen to be, then that's something they need to take care of in order to take care of their brain.
So, Kevin, 100%. So you know this. I mean, you've experienced this yourself. We all have an intuition. We call it a gut feeling. We call it butterflies in our stomach. That is our vagus nerve. It's a big nerve, cranial nerve, that branches out into our organs and especially our intestines. And you have this spidey sense, something's going off and something's going wrong. That's the gut communicating back to the brain. And often, if you're anxious, that's sending signals the other way, telling your gut, to fire over. Most serotonin, this is the feel-good hormone, is actually made in your gut. So these neurochemicals, the firing together, when this is upset, your gut is upset. When your gut's upset, your brain's upset. So getting fiber right in your diet, soluble fiber in particular, because this is the prebiotic stuff that feeds the good bacteria. Because what this will do is regulate your bowel movement frequency. Regulation of bowel movements is everything, especially for somebody who suffers from, irregularity, like irritable bowel syndrome or things that relate to irregularity. So when your gut's irregular, it's going to tell your brain things are not working well, and vice versa. You cannot talk to a single person diagnosed, well, it's more of a diagnosis of exclusion, but anyone who's been told they've got IBS, they also suffer from some degree of significant anxiety. And anyone who's got anxiety or does admit to having anxiety and depression, they are not regular. They do not have regular bowel movements.
Okay, this is a huge topic, a huge discussion to have. So let's talk about some parts of the brain now. We know so little about our brain. In fact, I would suggest that it's probably the most misunderstood or part of our body. We've researched every other part, but researchers and doctors still don't know. They know what everything does.
That's very true.
What's up here in the brain. So let's talk about the frontal cortex, for instance, which we're hearing.
It's our personality. That's us. That's who we are. It's very much defined as, you get rid of that. And we've all seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and that, coat hanger of a frontal lobotomy that's given. But that is ultimately who we are, where our person sits, where our character sits, our personality sits. And largely that's governed, by the rest of the brain. It's where we emote, where we have emotions. It's where a large degree of something called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, resides, because that's where we have to constantly evoke this neuroplasticity. Again, nerves that fire together, wire together, constantly firing and uncoupling, connecting and disconnecting. Here's some interesting stats or some concepts around the brain that we used to think, as I mentioned earlier, that we ultimately were very non-plastic. Again, neuroplastic means the ability to make new nerve connections and make new neurons. We make a few thousand new neurons every single day if we treat our brains right. That was just only recently discovered. The number thrown around for so long, though, was about 100 billion nerve cells. That's the mass of our brain. It's more recently been corrected to about 86 billion. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot. But what's really interesting, in my opinion, is the difference, when you look at animals and brain size and our brain size. So starting with brain size, I find this incredibly fascinating, where we think about a snail that has 11,000 neurons, a mouse that has 71 million, a raccoon has 2 billion, a chimp, very related to us, has 3 billion. But think about this for a second. An elephant has 257 billion. And of course, we know they have great memories, but why is an elephant not then smarter than a human? And it turns out it's because size does, but doesn't really matter. So it's where the neurons are located, and of course what the function of those neurons that perform. So it turns out that an elephant's brain has 98% of its neurons in its cerebellum. And the cerebellum is a mini brain at the back responsible for proprioception, which is a big term for basically, where my arm is right now in space and how my brain knows where that is. So think about how much it takes to run a trunk with all that dexterity to pick up a peanut, to wash itself, to communicate. So much of its neurocomplexity is involved in its trunk operations, right? Where ours is in our prefrontal cortex. That's our person, and our memory center. That's our, of course, hippocampus that we showed. So here's some other things. Your brain weighs 2% of your whole body weight, but it uses up 25% of all your calories burned. So that's a lot of energy. And so to be able to accommodate all this, Kevin, this is where I'm going, is evolution. Three things over the last about 250 million years, and more recently 2.5 million years, and even more recently 50,000 years, three things happened. So about 2.5 million years ago, we started to eat meat and marrow. And what that did for us is gave us a lot more B12 and folic acid than we ever had before. And that allowed for a much better brain complexity. Second thing, 50,000 years ago, we started to cook that meat. And ultimately, at the same time, there's a mutation in a gene, a single gene, which allowed us to manufacture what? Some of that DHA from meat. So DHA, brain juice, remember now we can get it in supplement form, but brain juice, that stuff that's so incredibly important for the brain, we started to actually process some of that ourselves from cooked meat. Third, a mutation in what we call RGAP11B, and that's a single mutation that increased the folding in our brain. That now when you open up a human cranium, we see all this folding in the cortex like you're showing up on screen there. That folding, that doesn't happen in a mouse or a raccoon. It's very smooth. So these three major things account for our intelligence, our individuality, and our ability to think and sort of be conscious as human beings. And now what we've learned is this mass organ has connections to every single other organ in ways that we never thought before. There's more connections that go from your heart to your brain than from your brain to your heart. So talk about the brain-gut connection. There's a very, very real heart-brain connection. So when your heart is upset, and you feel and you emote from your heart as well, we feel. The traditional Chinese medicine has had it right for millennia. So much of the emotion sits in the heart. So the heart can literally beat erratically and tell the brain, you better do something about our environment or get the hell out of here. And vice versa, your brain can be upset and cause your heart to beat erratically. Do you want to know what the most powerful thing you can do to equilibrate that situation? Whether you're anxious, you have a panic attack, or you're nervous, you can't sleep? Rhythmic breathing.
Yeah.
We've heard of deep breathing before, right?
And that's what we hear is one of the best things when you have anxiety, and that is the meditation and the rhythmic breathing and being aware of that breathing as well.
Absolutely. Do you know what? So here's how it works. So your heart, when it's beating, lub-dub, it's beating in a specific rhythm. But think about this for a moment. When you take a deep breath, all of a sudden your lungs expand. When the lungs expand, the heart now has less space to move for a second. So now it goes from a space of lub-dub to lub-dub, and then lub-dub, 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 lub-dub. Okay, so that's called concentric breathing, or that breathing is something that we do just naturally when we're, in the right headspace, let's call it. Now all of a sudden, enter panic or anxiety or stress or worry or the allure of future impending doom. What do you have? You don't have that concentric breathing. What you have is an erratic breathing. And then the heart starts to beat more as in fight or flight, lub-dub, 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 lub-dub. So what you can do immediately to change it back, so to create what we call coherence, or this brain heart regulation, is you do a very deep breath in through the nose for a count of 5, and you hold for a count of 7. And then you breathe out through pursed lips for a count of 8. So 5, 7, 8. And you repeat that 4 to 6 times. You have created that heart rate variability that your brain needs. Your heart has to get into that variability that your brain then says, everything's going to be all right. So you're literally telling your heart to tell your brain instead of trying to convince your brain out of something that feels real and feels anxious.
Why is the brain such a mystery to us still?
So, I think we've reviewed, I think over time, if you look at medical evolution, we always thought of the four humors, and, in medicine, our forefathers always thought of, the heart as being the main area that pumped the blood, and, other organs, bile and humors being more important, and disregarded the brain as being anything more than a radiator, actually, that cooled the blood for us. And it's literally only been in the last 20 years, 2-3 decades, that they've started to exponentially devise what the brain is actually doing at any given time. And it's beyond just these centers. It's beyond even neuroplasticity, the ability to connect and reconnect and grow new neurons. It's come to the point of even, 3-4 years ago, understanding that we don't have 100 billion neurons, we have only 86. And that's a huge difference. That number discrepancy there would mean the difference between us eating 12, 13 hours a day and only the hour and a half that we have to eat. And here's the underpinning to that, by the way. A scientist, a Brazilian scientist, actually, her name doesn't, I feel bad, I don't remember her name right now, but a Brazilian scientist took it upon herself and her team to put detergent into the brains, of course, of cadavers that volunteered to this. I think it was about 10, and melted the brains and then extracted the neuronal cells only. These are active thinking cells, because, by the way, maybe we'll chat very briefly about this. We have different types of cells in the brain responsible for different things, including detoxification. That's really important. We detox in our brain differently than the rest of our body. So this scientist revealed that she could only count 86 billion nucleuses. She didn't actually count 86 billion. She took the space and then replicated that over multiple brains. But for everyone else was counting how many cells. She actually counted how many thinking cells there were in the brain. And so we had to reduce that number to 86 billion, which is still pretty formidable. So it turns out...
I want to ask a question just before we continue on with that. And again, I'm sorry, because these questions come through. There's a few people asking about, can your DHA levels be determined through a blood test, or what way are they determined? And can anyone get that? Can anyone get that done?
Love that. Absolutely, yes. So we have a third arm to our initiative. It's called the Living Brain Project. .com. So the Living Brain Project, where we've tested all kinds of elite athletes, pro, sports, all the way through to the layperson. We're looking at a blood spot test you can order and then have it sent to your home. It's a little blood prick test. It's called an omega-3 index. It's a little blood spot that goes on a piece of paper that gets mailed out to a lab, the best lab of its kind in all of North America, Omega Quant. And they will not only measure your DHA, they measure your EPA, which is responsible for inflammation, very important for the brain as well, not as important as DHA. It'll also measure your AA, arachidonic acid to EPA, which is an inflammatory marker. And it'll measure dozens of other endpoints of brain and cellular health. So the livingbrainproject.com, I invite anyone and everyone, and it's a direct reflection. So this will blow your mind. Having an omega-3 index higher than 8 will reduce all-cause mortality. That means whether you die from a heart attack or the big C, cancer, or any other condition you can imagine, diabetes, liver failure, it will reduce all-cause mortality by over 30%, cardiovascular disease by upwards of 90%. So just having, and most of us in North America, have less than 4%. And we need higher than 8%. So we can devise that out of a simple blood prick test onto a piece of cardboard sent off to a lab very inexpensively. So yes, check that out.
I have a few people who are living with multiple sclerosis. And so they're asking what advice you would have for those with MS.
MS is a very interesting condition, one we're still trying to figure out, autoimmune in nature. But one thing that's always struck me, and the literature hasn't changed and the research has always been consistent, if you look at the equator, North 10 and South 10, you basically do not, it's an epidemiological disease, you do not find multiple sclerosis there along the equator. So the high correlation between, environment, diet, lifestyle, and of course, autoimmune disease has been identified, especially with those with MS. And it seems to be in this particular area that it would be a no-brainer, excuse the pun, that vitamin D plays a role. Vitamin D is one of the most important vitamins for the brain as well. The sun vitamin, of course, we get it from the sun. Living where we live here, Kev, north of 40, we're not getting enough. In the summer, we're told to put on sunblock. In the winter, we don't see it. So vitamin, we're almost all of us very deficient. And if you're going to go to see your doctor...
You mean by putting on sunblock, we're actually diminishing the impact vitamin D has on our system.
You're literally blocking it. Same UVA, UVB. The UVB has to penetrate the skin to activate cholesterol deep in your skin to make vitamin D. And 15 minutes of full body exposure is not going to burn you. Any dermatologist would say it's perfectly healthy, is going to translate into about 10,000 IU of vitamin D in that day. And that's what you need, minimum. So, none of us get that.
So we have to make the choice. Cancer or helping our brain?
I mean, this is often what we come up against, and that's the same when we're choosing the right foods. That's the same when we're considering chemicals found in our environment. Pesticides when we're considering organic versus inorganic. I mean, when you talk about the correlation between pesticides and Parkinson's, for example, another brain affliction, it's extremely high. Back to Dr. Dale Bredesen's work. I interviewed him for my book. You talk about the book. Here it is, Brain Spanners. It's coming out in July.
Wait, that's your new book?
This is it.
Oh, looking good.
Yeah.
Okay, look at that.
This is it, yeah. And you've got Dr. Julian Bales, Dr. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Andrew Wylde, Dr. Bill Sears, Dr. Amen, Bredesen, Roland McCready. It's a lineup of about 18 superstars in the world of brain health. So not just me. Half the book is me interviewing these incredible brain experts. But Dr. Bredesen has identified, 5 subtypes of Alzheimer's. There isn't one. That's why these blockbuster drugs aren't working. You can't address Alzheimer's with a drug. You address Alzheimer's with diet, lifestyle, the gut, the microbiome we were talking about as it relates to the gut brain. You address it with, controlling and managing inflammation. So that's why, full circle to the top of the show. When you think about brain first and foremost, and you're not stumped by what have you done for your brain today, it's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking everybody, and I want them to pay attention. When you address what have you done for your brain today, not one thing, but a multiplicity of things, your whole body gets healthier. Everything improves.
Okay. I want to talk about that. I also want to get, a lot of people are asking about vegetarians, because you mentioned the importance that meat played in the development of our brains, evolution of our brains. And then someone is also saying, what kind of vegetables are best for your brain? So
yeah, great question. So the answer to that, nowadays, I actually interviewed James Aspey in the book, and he's the consummate vegan, not just vegetarian. Of course, the differentiation there, because vegetarians still often eat, depending if they're ovo or lacto-ovo, or they often eat dairy, and they consume eggs and some fish. By the way, in my personal opinion, before I get into diets and what the literature says, my personal opinion, the healthiest diet on the whole planet is pescatarian. And that is avoiding red meat, dairy, eggs. It's fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and fish. And do I do that? I don't have the willpower to do that. I'm close, but I love organic, grass-fed red meat. We'll get into that in a second. If you're vegan, you can supplement with folic acid and B12, so you no longer have to eat meat to get that. Do I think there's some other things that benefit us from meat? I would argue that, but that's not what this show is. You can still be very, very, very healthy as a vegan. I test people for their genetic aptitude. That is to say, genomics. I look at genes and then decide what the best diet is for them. I literally can look at their DNA and say they should be paleo, they should trend more to keto, they should be vegan, they should be vegetarian. So that aside, if you can't test, pescatarian, #1 diet. If you're vegan, and that's because of other things like, ethics, I highly believe that you can be very, very healthy so long as you supplement. You also don't get enough essential fatty acids because you're not eating fish. So this brain armor, and again, full disclosure, if you're just joining, I work for this company, help them with the formulations. This is a vegan from algal oil DHA. You need to supplement with that. You need B12, and you need a specific type of folic acid called folate or folinic acid in your diet. Okay, so this is vegans. We've evolved to eat meat, and so long as it's grass-fed and it's not pesticide-laden, environments that these animals are exposed to, because they super bioaccumulate. They're animals. They have fat. And everything they consume and are exposed to, they consume, and then that percolates into their system, and they store that, and then you consume that. So that's called bioaccumulation. We have to be very careful about that. Healthiest foods for the brain, it's called the rainbow of fruits and vegetables.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Is there nothing good for us that involves poutine?
So if you're having, so count them. red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. 6 every day, both a serving of vegetables and a serving of fruit. It's not that hard to do, Kev. I mean, seriously, it's, a very big salad. It's a soup. You can, make the soup and freeze it. It's cut fruits, first thing in the morning, some carrot sticks as a snack. But I want people to pay attention closely to what I said in terms of the variety of colors, because there are things in purple. And you should audit your fridge, because if you're out of blue and purple, those are proanthocyanidins. It's a big word, but those are some of the healthiest brain phytonutrients on the planet.
Okay,
so beets,
I was just going to say, what's purple?
Yeah, so beets, red cabbage, eggplant, you think of the skin, grapes, blueberries, they all fall into this category that have very high anthocyanidins. Again, so healthy for the brain. Everything that's healthy for the brain is healthy for the cardiovascular system as well. But then there are ingredients found, for example, in orange, varietal, and yellow fruits and vegetables called quercetin. Quercetin is a bioflavonoid that boosts, you heard me say this once, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So just like DHA found in that Brain Armor algal oil, boosting BDNF is going to boost neuroplasticity. You want that. That's going to make more brain cells and keep the ones that you have healthier, right? So once again, if the government, this is, the government saying we need 7 to 8 servings of fresh fruits and vegetables every day, I'd say double that, but that's the minimum. Most of us aren't coming close. Most of us are very, very deficient, both dietarily and micronutrients.
I want to get to a question from one of my regulars. She does have a husband who has dementia, and she wants to know, some advice for taking care of him. And I might ask on her behalf as well for taking care of herself.
Well, yeah. So so caregivers, and I mean I can attest to that, and also my wife at this point in time, her father, my father-in-law, also has dementia. They've both been diagnosed, my mother and my father-in-law, with Alzheimer's. The first thing is getting an appropriate assessment. That is to say, a proper diagnosis, because not all dementia is the same. As I identified, even the work of Dr. Dale Bredesen, and mark my words, he will win a Nobel Prize for this work. End of Alzheimer's, okay? The End of Alzheimer's, read that book. Identify what subtype of dementia he's got, because there is glycotoxic, and that is dementia without being diagnosed with diabetes, but you have a glyco or sugar toxic brain. There is an inflammatory predisposition. There's a cardiovascular predisposition. So all of these, you could even have a toxic, dementia. Once you identify the type of dementia you have, then you can go in there and start to literally reverse, okay? So not just manage, but reverse. And I'm not talking about curing. There's a difference. So there's stages to dementia. Alzheimer's is 1 through 7. So you can bring somebody from not typically 6 and 7, but often from 4 or 5, you can bring them back to 1 and 2, and so long as they maintain compliance.
So she's added in here, her husband has Lewy body dementia?
Lewy body, right? That's different. Okay, so but he covers that, Dr. Bredesen, in the book. I'm just going to throw some things out there.
Yeah.
So a few things that are, from a supplement. That's my area of expertise. I couldn't, be more strong in my recommendation for that DHA. Right, so that's number 1. So DHA, managing the immune system. So I really like an ingredient called citicoline. So citicoline is an extract. It ultimately comes in some cases from soy that can fuel brain cells. So I love citicoline. It also helps, actually, a lot of studies done around focus, attention, alertness, concentration, better memory. And then I also recommend theanine. Theanine is an amino acid, and it can actually help to create a better neurocircuitry in the brain. So it's a very simple, it's an extract of green tea. It's found in green tea, essentially. And again, looking into toxic as well as potential viral or bacterial contributors, and ruling out things like Lyme disease, by the way.
Now, we just put your website up, wildeabouthealth.com. People can get all sorts of information there. We're talking right now with Bryce Wylde, who is one of the chief alternative medicine experts in this country, if not in this continent. And we're talking about the brain. We're talking about something that we probably should be thinking of the very first thing, but up until now, there's been no real workouts for the brain or anything like that. So I kind of want to recap what we can do right now. So the rainbow of vegetables, eating properly is important, and that of course includes the healthy fats. We keep hearing so much about the healthy fats, and that's why I guess you talk to some centenarians in Italy, where they have a lot of olive oil, a lot of the Mediterranean diet.
That's it. The Mediterranean diet. Well, here, I'll offer up some biohacks. I mean, we all know exercise is really good. We should be doing more of that in weight bearing. So I'm not going to be, on my soapbox preaching what people already know. But here's a biohack for you. How about first thing in the morning doing a contrast shower? So when you get in the shower and you've enjoyed your shower, you cleaned up and you've shaved and done whatever else you're supposed to do, you're going to put it as hot as you possibly can without scolding yourself, really hot, okay? And then that's going to be a minute. Then you're going to flip it over to freezing cold as your pipes bring it, as cold as you can manage, and you're going to leave it on for a minute that way. Then you're going to bring it back to hot for a minute and then back to cold for a minute, and you're going to end off on cold. What is that going to do? That is going to stimulate your vagus nerve, and that's the nerve that connects your brain to your gut, and it's also going to boost BDNF and heat shock protein. It's going to enhance lymphatic flow, which also supports the brain. When it comes to diet, Kev, I'll tell you, one of my favorite slogans of all time, one of my favorite authors, actually, New York Times bestseller, Michael Pollan. I don't know if you've read any of his work.
No.
Michael Pollan, The Omnivore's Dilemma, was one of my favorite books on the topic of just diet in general. But his slogans goes like this: eat food, and what he means by that is real food, organic, local. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And he doesn't underscore it, but I'll unscore it. Mostly. That's the operative term here. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Best advice I could possibly ever give, borrowing from the work of Michael Pollan, but I'd only add to that, eat a rainbow. When it comes to supplementing, I highly recommend adding, soluble fiber. We just don't get enough of it in our diet, and that is the stuff that's probably more important than probiotics. Soluble fiber, like the stuff out of guar bean, chicory root, these are things that ultimately dissolve in water and disappear. One of the commercially available ones is called sun fiber, SUNFIBER. It doesn't matter what the product is, it's all guar bean, and that's the stuff to take. So sun fiber, look for that on your bottle. This stuff is a prebiotic. So bacteria need to eat. We need to feed the good bacteria, and we don't get enough of that food through our systems. So adding that in supplement form is going to support brain gut. That's a real important dietary thing. And then sleep. Sleep is underappreciated. It's not the amount of hours you clock on your pillow. It's the depth of sleep. So sleep has an architecture behind it, and it's got 5 stages. It's kind of like steps. You go down these 4 steps at night, and to get into stage 3 and 4 is of utmost importance before you bounce up into a very light phase, most often misunderstood as the deepest phase. It's not REM, where your eyes start flipping around in your head and you're having dreams. That's the lightest phase of sleep. But that whole 5-step process, that's architecture of a single phase. That has to be repeated about 4 or 5 times a night, and it takes the average person 60 to 90 minutes. So you do the quick math, and you can see why sleep researchers and scientists idealize the 7 to 8 hours. But it has to be deep, and you have to go through all kinds of apps. And if you're a snorer, you are starving your brain. You're getting hypoxic at night. I don't care how much you snore, how deeply you snore, you are starving your brain. So working on sleep architecture, depth of sleep. And so here's the hack: work on your environment, sleep hygiene. Make sure you have a cool room. Sounds cold, but it's not. 68 degrees is ideal. Cool room, super dark, black out your blinds, make sure your bed is comfortable. A lot of people don't think about that one. It seems obvious. And make sure you got a white noise or a noise blocker, because that's going to make sure that you're not woken up periodically and interrupting that very important sleep phase. But I alluded to this, and I'm sorry, and then we talked about detox earlier on. We've heard about detoxification, cleansing the body, maybe taking a couple of days fast and supporting the liver. But the brain has what are called glial cells. This is unlike anything else in the body. If you don't sleep at night, you don't detoxify your brain. For so long, scientists have wondered, what the hell is sleep all about anyway? Now we're realizing it's so that your brain can detox not only the thoughts of the prior day, but literally toxins that just develop from metabolism, just having thoughts. You're making cellular slough. And you can only get rid of that when you are cool and sleeping deeply. That's when your brain allows it to flow through what's called the glymphatic system. So we call this glymphatics. Glial, and then because your brain doesn't have lymph. So glial cells that rid of brain toxins only happens at night while you sleep, and when you sleep well and optimally, you are detoxing like a brain spanner.
Am I being an idiot here? And I hope I'm not, but is there a correlation between bad dreams, vivid dreams, nightmares, and a toxic brain?
I don't think so. I don't think that's at all a bad question. I think what you're noticing when you have a bad dream is that you're coming out of that cycle in your fifth phase. And you might have some things to work out. I'm not saying there isn't anything to dream psychology, but when you remember a dream, it's because you've woken up out of REM. We all have approximately, based on EEG, this is not my opinion, this is what we see in the literature, based on EEG or encephalography, you're going to have certain amounts of REM throughout the night. And it's only during REM that you're dreaming. This is fact. We know this. So if you wake up out of an REM, you're going to remember the dream. If you don't wake up out of the REM, you typically won't remember the dream unless it's been extremely vivid and you've woken up to go to the washroom. You might retain that. So bad dreams, I mean, we don't really know what this is. Psychologists believe that it's probably working through learning a new experience, being uncertain. So things I shouldn't comment on. They're not my area of expertise.
Sugar. What about sugar? The refined sugar.
Boy, if there's an arch enemy to the brain, it is insulin spikes, kind of like eating sort of like a diabetic. So on top of a fruit and vegetable laden diet, mainly plants, lots of clean organic protein, we want to stay away from sugar. So sugar causes insulin spikes. It causes the brain to go haywire, literally. So we need to be fasting a little longer than we do. So breaking fast, having a break fast or breakfast, that's in the very term. It's in the name. Breaking that fast, however, should probably be more along the lines of 14, the literature says, to 16 hours, and having about an 8-hour feeding window versus what we're used to, which is
We had Dr. Fung here on this program a couple of weeks ago now. And he had talked about that a lot.
Yeah, huge literature supporting intermittent fasting and brain health. So it just turns out that the more time that we have to process what we've eaten in our previous meals, and with a surplus of food you can get in an 8-hour feeding window, and if it's all the right food, and once again, this is going to it's going to feed back to body fat. Not how much you weigh on the scale, but keeping lean and trim in your abdomen is a direct correlation to how healthy your brain is, of course, because it all ties in the cardiovascular system, the lymphatic system, the immune system, and all of that. Yeah. So 8 hours eating the right types of foods, 16 hours fasting seems to be ideal if you can do it.
And these were the books that Dr. Jason Fung had done on diabetes and the obesity code. So I'm going to wrap up here because this time just goes like that. First of all, it didn't help that we were late getting on the air. But the one thing I do notice, I notice this on so many things on this program, and that is that we've talked about what's good for our anxiety. We've talked about what's good for our health, our biological health, and our muscles. We've talked about what's good for sleeping. We've talked about what's good for our brain. And it just seems it's all the same stuff. So if we're taking care of our brain by doing this, we're literally, exercising 4 other birds with the one stone, if you will. So if we can do everything to take care of our brain, everything will sort of fall into line with how we're taking care of our emotions and our physical well-being.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, Kev. And, it's just taking a bit of a different angle, thinking actively, what have you done for your brain today? We should all be asking that question. And as we head off to bed in the coming hours, I'll leave you with this last tip, the oral microbiome, something we don't hear a lot about. But just like the gut microbiome, there's a microbiome of specific bacteria in the oral cavity. And the correlation between dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, other neurodegenerative conditions, and the health of your gums is like that. So first, floss. Second, brush. But third, look into especially if you have chronic bad breath, or if you have gum margins, your dentist always telling you look unhealthy, or periodontal disease, or frequent cavities, or you do eat a lot of sugar. Look into probiotics for the oral cavity called Bliss K12 and M18. This is research done out of Auckland, New Zealand. Decades ago, but you can find gum with this stuff in it. You can have chewables with this stuff in it. So upon good oral hygiene, get that done first, establish that routine, but then consider chewing one of these probiotics for the oral microbiome. And, doing that is going to benefit your brain tremendously as well.
And you hit on something else, because we're finally learning that good oral health is directly related to heart disease, or bad oral health, I should say, is directly related to heart disease. So it's just, your whole body really is interconnected. And this talk between mental health and physical health, there really is not really a border there. They're all one and the same. Our whole bodies are a whole.
And as we come out, I said one more thing. I lied. It will be two more things, because I got to end on this with what you just said. As it relates to mental health, as we phase back into more of a normalcy, as we get more, sort of comfortable with, getting outdoors, I beg everyone there to try more forest bathing, what the Japanese call Shinrin Yoku. It's a practice of just getting outside, doing exercise, doing walking, jogging in forest. Why? The greenery, the foliage of the trees, and this is the time of year, emit what is called negative ions. And these negative ions that come out of trees and flora and fauna boost serotonin in the brain. And it is so incredibly healthy. It can subdue, just being out in nature. We all know we feel better from it, but there's a biochemistry that's going on there that's directly related to brain health, Kev.
And you know what? I've had all the people on the show. I'm trying to find his name here. The professor I had from the University at Exeter, or Exeter University. Where was that? Was that Dr. Bennett? No, it wasn't. Anyway, he was talking about, they had done a study. And they had found that anybody who spends 120 minutes a week in nature will reap benefits, both mental and physical. And if you want to go back in one of my shows, you can actually listen to them. It all comes full circle. Everything just keeps coming around to taking care of yourself. And you don't need to have 5 minutes a day to take care of your brain, 5 minutes a day to take care of your teeth. It's all one and the same.
Nature heals, and we know it. We know it intuitively. Yeah, and thank you so much for the opportunity, Kevin. I really, really appreciate being on your show. And I mean, if people come away from the show with only one thing, let it be this question they ask themselves every day: what have I done for my brain today?
And once again, the website is wildeabouthealth.
Or brainspanners.com.
Or brainspanners.com. So wildeabouthealth.com. And if you are there links on your website to those?
Not yet, because we're actually soft launching right now. So we are.
Okay.
The book will be out in July, but Brain Spanners is live. It'll be much more interactive come July.
So Brain Spanners. Show me the book again. Show me the book, because no one's seen this.
Brain Spanners. There we go. Chocker blocked with interviews, including Dr. Deepak Chopra, Dr. Julian Bales, Dr. Mehmet Oz, Andrew Wylde, Bill Sears. He's the. By the way, talking about Bill Sears, he's the guru of pediatrics in North America. This is the guy that we've all read, side by side, Dr. Spock, and he says the same thing. If you're going to do one thing, your postnatal, your breastfeeding, consume DHA, a quality source DHA. That's brain juice. It's going to increase IQ. It's going to increase immune function. It's going to increase the quality and health of every organ in your body, let alone your brain.
All right, and I've got so many people asking. The one question that's been top of everyone's mind: will you come back?
Hey, thank you. Listen, I love chatting with you. We have such a not only a great friendship, but a deep, rich history on air. I mean, you pull it out of me, and I appreciate it.
Well, I'm suggesting maybe even next week, and I'll tell you why, if you're able to. Next week, I'm dedicating the entire week to post-isolation. What we need to know about coming out of isolation, because this has been more traumatic to our minds and our bodies than people realize. This has never happened.
I'd love to. I accept the invitation. I affectionately refer to this as the COVID concussion.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, and not to belittle anyone who's actually been physically struck to the head or plays pro sports and is actually suffering from a trauma, a blow to the head. But if you think about it, that aside, if you haven't been physically struck, think about this. This is discombobulation. This is anxiety. This is bad sleep or interrupted sleep. This is the allure of future doom, lack of attention, focus, and concentration, all of which are hallmark to concussion. So I call this kind of like the coronavirus concussion or the COVID concussion, because our bell has been rung globally, really.
So next week, we're going to talk with you about how you treat this concussion and what you have, because if you get a concussion, you're not supposed to go jogging right away or anything like that. So we're going to talk to you about getting out of isolation. I don't want to reveal too much stuff yet, or else you won't watch next week. So Bryce, thank you so much for this. Brain Spanners, watch for it. It's coming out in really, it's not that long from now, and
it's a few weeks away.
Do something for your brain. There you go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kev. I appreciate it. And thanks for everyone else. I haven't been reading the threads, just trying to keep my eyeballs on the camera.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Honestly, we are, as soon as we're going, Brain Spanners, we're going to be live frequently there. But the website, Wylde About Health, and
Send
fire off an email.
Yeah, and then, All right, great. Thank you again, Bryce, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
For sure.
Namaste.
Thanks so much.
Was that a namaste?
That was a namaste.
Namaste. All right, to you, sir. Thank you. You know what? I love Bryce. But after I finish talking to him, again, I am out of breath. He is just a wealth of information. He knows what he's talking about. He doesn't steer you wrong. And you cannot trip him up. You just can't. It's impossible. So like I said, next week we are going to be talking about getting out of isolation, because it shouldn't be something you just flick a switch and then next week you're just back to your normal life. You can't do that. So we're going to talk about what you should be, how you should be preparing mentally, how you should be preparing physically, what you should expect, and what you're going to need to get over, because you're going to be worried about getting on a bus or going into a crowded area of anything like that. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. Oh, you're going to love this woman. Another friend of mine, worked with her for a few years now, Marcia Brown. She runs Trust 15 in North Etobicoke, working with at-risk kids, changing lives. A little bit of a warning tomorrow. I'm going to be trying to pick your pocket tomorrow because we need to support this organization, and I'm going to tell you why tomorrow here on Kevin's Isolators. So you got your marching orders right now. You gotta take it easy. You got to eat right. You've got to exercise your brain, the proper supplements, and getting a decent sleep. So I want to thank Bryce for joining me tonight. Just a wealth of information. He'll be back again next week as we talk, as we sort of wind down isolation, keeping our fingers crossed. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me tonight, and thanks for sticking through because we were late. I apologize for that. Until tomorrow, take care of yourself, take care of your brain, and take care of each other.
COVID-19, why you do this to me? I really don't like being stuck in quarantine. I have no toilet paper, I don't even